Okay, so in this question, we are asked to compare the producer surplus and the consumer surpluses in the case of two different demand curves. So let's just give a quick refresher of what those two terms actually mean. Consumer surplus is defined as the difference between a consumer's willingness to pay, which is, as you learned earlier in the chapter, represented by the demand curve, and what the consumer actually pays for that good. Producer surplus is very similar in that it is the difference between the producer's willingness to supply at a certain price and what they actually receive for selling their product. And this willingness to supply is represented by the supply curve. And the price that uh, consumers pay and producers supply at is defined as the equilibrium between these two curves, which is represented by, in this case, by the dotted line that I drew, and we will call this price P1. So, according to the definitions we just gave, producer surplus is easily represented by the area of this triangle right here. The area between the price actually supplied at and what the producers are willing to supply at. Consumer surplus is very similar in that it is represented in this drawing by the triangle just directly on top of it. Now, when we draw a second demand curve that is flatter than the first demand curve, but goes through the same equilibrium point, we can see that this area for demand curve 2 is smaller. But because the savant curve did not move, then this area remains exactly the same. So if we were saying that the surpluses for producers and consumers is designated by the area that is between those particular curves and the price that is used in this market, our answer is pretty clear. In the case of demand curve 2, the consumer surplus goes down relative to demand curve 1, while the producer surplus remains exactly the same between the two curves.